Hey, what's up, guys? It's Reed Young, aka Shooter here. I'm going to be reviewing this three-handed deep stacked hand where we have queens in the small blind. First off, I just wanted to ask you guys about the frequency of the videos. Do you guys want to see more videos more often, or is one a week-ish good with you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll do my best to cater to what you guys are liking. So, getting into the hand. We're almost 300 big blinds deep here, so you guys can see we're playing an ante-game. Generally, that means that pre-flop aggression is going to be a lot higher because you can get away with opening more often to steal the blinds and antes since you're risking less to win a bigger pot. And then that is going to be extrapolated to several other pre-flop dynamics, because if people are opening more often, you can re-raise more often to try to steal their open, and if you can do that, you can rebluff that, and then things get crazy. So especially deep stack, there should be some pretty crazy play here. However, the read on the big blind is that he is a quote-unquote good reg who 3-bets 5% of the time. And given what I said about playing three-handed and deep stacked with an ante, I don't really think that means he's a good reg. So let's take that with a grain of salt moving forward. We also don't really have any idea about the sample size of this, which if you guys are watching, if you're posting hands on poker forums, you need to always include the sample sizes for your reads. You can't just say someone 3-bets 5% of the time, because we don't know if that means he's 3-bet, 10 out of the last whatever 3-bets the last times he's 3-bet, or if it's one time out of 20. So given such a small amount of information, I'm just going to treat this hand kind of readless. So we open to 4 big blinds in the small blind. I think it's fine because a lot of the time what's going to happen is we're going to be out of position, get flatted, and we're deep stacked. He can raise the flop, really mess with us, so there's a number of things he can do. Very difficult for us to value bet thinly, and it's very easy for us to get bluffed. Even if it is just folding something like king high, we're not going to be able to get marginal hands to showdown that often, and a good player is going to be flatting a little bit more in position to take advantage of that. Also, there are the antes in play, so I like the fact that we're giving the big blind a little, worse pot odds to continue. So he ends up re-raising to 16 big blinds. A bit larger of a re-raise size if you guys are thinking about 100 big blind play. 16 big blinds is pretty huge, in fact, but we are super deep, so I like the sizing here. It's not risking a ton, but it is kind of getting the point across, like, hey, I'm going to put you in some awkward spots post-flop if you're just trying to continue with like 10-7 suited. So, what are you going to do? We end up calling with queens. I think it's okay just because if we 4-bet, facing a 5-bet could be, pretty tricky. That said, usually I'm playing pretty aggressive this deep, and when people don't think you're going to have a wide value range pre-flop here, 4-betting as a bluff just isn't going to really work, or it shouldn't work as often as a lot of people have it work, I suppose. So as you move up in stakes, people are going to understand what your range is. They're going to react more to your range and less to the amount of money that you're putting in the pot. So even though a re-raise can be scary, if you don't have value hands to back it up, then your bluffs aren't going to work that often against a good player. So you're going to get flatted in position, and 300 big blinds deep, that can be pretty gross. So we call. I think it's okay. I would probably 4-bet most people, unless I was trying to trap or something out of the norm. Normally I would be 4-betting most opponents. So on the flop, it's 10-9-7, all different suits. We check, and the big blind continuation bets, which first off, let's talk about that. His range to continuation bet here, I would not expect to be extremely weak. So I would say he at least has an overcard and a gutter on average here. Maybe something like 6-7 for a different type of hand, but I would say he has some sort of equity almost always here. And especially against queens, that could be as little as 2 overcards with ace king. So to check raise here, I think is pretty optimistic. I think it's a little thin. It's not necessarily bad because of a few reasons. We're not going to get 3-bet a lot, and that's because we're representing such a polarized range. I think most hands that our opponent would be continuation betting and then react to this raise should be calling as well, because we're crazy deep, and unless he has a straight, really even Jack 8, it's tough to get it in here. If you have, I guess what's the other straight, 8-6, you might actually be less happy getting that all in than you would a hand like pocket tens, because if you get 8-6 all in, you can be drawing dead against Jack 8, but pocket tens can really never be drawing dead. So, you might get it in against a straight, but at least you have some decent equity in the hand. You might also get it in against worse hands for value. So I think getting a pocket tens in the big blind's position is a bit better if he's trying to work in a flop 3-betting range. But in general, flatting in position when you're looking at such a polarized range is going to be a better idea from the big blind's perspective. So what that means is we can check raise a bit wider and expect him to play pretty straightforwardly, and also not lose that much to hands that beat us. If we do, we're likely just going to be value counting ourselves. So if it comes off like 10-7, 9, 2, 3, and we bet, the turn in the river, we might get called by 10-9, we might get called by pocket jacks, we might get called by 9-8 that's putting us on some sort of straight draw. So, there's a lot of things that can happen with a check raise. So I don't think it's terrible, I just think it generally overrepresents our hand. And if we do have a narrow range here pre-flop, it's going to be a tough sell to represent really any of the huge hands that hit this board. Really what we're repping is like 7s, 9s, and 10s. And that's not that many combinations. It's only about 9 combinations. And deep stacked, usually there's a ton of different combinations flying around there. So when you're bluffing, you want to make sure you have a wide and balanced value range, just like pre-flop. So this check raise I don't really care for it that much, but I think we probably will get bet called by worse hands often enough that it's okay. So we check raise, we get called, as predicted, I suppose. On the turn, it goes check check, and I think that's okay as well. We probably don't represent that many 8s, but the problem with this is if we are semi-bluffing the flop with a hand like Queen Jack, then this is probably a turn that we'd want to bluff. It's a similar situation where we're still representing a very polarized range, maybe fewer straights since we probably don't have Jack 8 that often. But in general, players don't raise this turn as often as they probably should be, so we're kind of free rolling on a bluff with Queen Jack, meaning that if we do get called by pocket 7s or something like that, or 7-9, whatever decent type of hand you might call the turn with, that it's basically just a bluff catcher, that we still get to realize our equity with a hand like Queen Jack or King Jack, or any straight draw, like Ace Jack of spades, for instance. So I think betting the turn is kind of a merge, and sometimes we get called by worse if we have queens here. Sometimes we get called by worse, sometimes we get called by better. I think checking is fine also, and so I don't mean to make it sound kind of like all over the place where I'm saying like, yeah, you can do this and it's okay, or you can do this and it's okay. A lot of those types of situations come up deeper stacked when play is extremely read-based. So I think checking here is fine. This guy seems to be pretty passive and straightforward, so I think we actually do get to show down the best hand a decent amount of the time and just see something like King 10 check it down. So turn 6, check check. The river is the Jack of Hearts, which also brings a backdoor flush draw, and we're deciding how to continue on the river. So I think This is actually a nice spot to know the answer to the sample size question about that pre-flop 3-bet. If he is 3-betting 5% of the time, then a lot of his hands are going to be, jacks or better here. And if he's folding all of those hands when we bet the river, of course we should just be betting the river. You could bet something like 2/3 pot and represent an 8 and do a good job of bluffing here. Also, our line on the turn indicates some sort of showdown value, so I think our river bet does get a lot more credit in general against a better player. It's because it's such a scary turn. Even if we did have like ace queen of spades, we might continue bluffing, or it's at least conceivable that we continue bluffing on this turn to try to represent a hand like ace 8 suited, or 7-8 that we decided to check raise, something like that, even pocket eights. So by betting the river now with queens, it's certainly a bluff. I'd almost never expect a worse hand to get called to call us, so I don't think there's any value really in it. But against an extremely tight player, I think it's the clear play. Against a looser player, you might want to try to check down queens, and maybe we beat something like king 10 if he's straightforward. If he's not straightforward, then we are in a very difficult position here on the river, because we can check, and our opponent could turn a lot of hands into a bluff to represent either the backdoor flush draw or an 8 that he checked back on the turn. A good thing about the river, though, is I think if it does go check-check, a lot of the time he's going to have queen-jack or king-jack that improved on the river and just tries to show down. And since we beat that, I think checking does help us get to showdown pretty often. But the thing you need to weigh, and kind of the crux of the hand, is the 3-bet percentage. How many times is he going to have king-jack or queen-jack versus pocket kings and aces? If his range is completely kings and aces, then we definitely need to bluff the river, because we just lose to his entire range. If it's a lot wider than that, maybe we can check fold the river, or check raise bluff the river. That's an option as well. And sometimes it goes check check, and we get to show down the best hand against a pair of tens or a pair of jacks. So let me know what you guys think about this video. It's a pretty complex spot. There's a lot of different decisions and a lot of marginal decisions being made throughout the entire hand. If you guys have any comments on the flop play especially, I'd love to hear them. So I will see you guys in the comment section below. Take care, guys.